Alright everyone, here's something different that I don't normally post. So on Saturday, July 26th, I was at the Aquino Tank Weekend. It's located at the Canadian Tank Museum in Oshawa. And at this show you can see a lot of military vehicles and tanks moving around. They also demonstrate the weapons that were used in World War II. But the biggest part of the show is that they actually do 2 reenactments. And that's what this video is going to be about. So the first reenactment is from World War II, and this was taken from the morning show. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this reenactment. And by the way, this is going to be loud. So if you don't like loud noises, then please turn down your volume. It will also feature some shooting as well. Anyways, hope you enjoy this.
The German troops are taking up their defensive positions in the southeastern Netherlands, bringing forward Schutz's 3 Oshawa self-propelled gun on the hill, and setting up machine gun emplacements at the sandbag positions in the grass. Now you'll notice at the far right end, we've got a reconnaissance party coming in with universal carriers with the Queen's Own rifles on board. Have they seen each other yet, though? Allied infantry dismounting to do reconnaissance on foot. These reconnaissance parties, oh, there we go. We've had first contact. Exchanging fire, and it looks like one of the universal carriers might be taken out. Reconnaissance party. Allied troops were necessarily prepared for such stiff resistance. Yeah, we lost one of the Brand gun carriers. They have to go back now and report to their main force what they've encountered and let them know what they do. You'll notice among the German troops that Claymore war weapons are now, of course, in the picture, along with their pre-existing Karabiner 98K rifles, which have been an evolution of an earlier Mauser Gewehr 98 rifle from the First World War, and their 40 submachine guns, also equipped with Sturmgewehr 44 assault rifles, which are in the middle of the thing firing now. This is, in one sense, the first fully capable and effective assault rifle that saw widespread service. Arguably not the first ever. And it pioneered a shift in combat whereby engagements were now happening within 300 meters apart between both sides. So the accuracy, long range of a rifle going out to 1,000 meters or more just wasn't really necessary. But to sustain a high rate of fire even during short range engagements, the STG-44 made use of a shorter cartridge, the 9.2 by 33 millimeter Furtz cartridge, rather than the Karabiner 98 full length 57 millimeter cartridge, making it easier to sustain that 500 rounds per minute rate of fire. Now the Allied forces are moving in. Having seen the incoming tanks, the German forces are retreating to more fortified positions, which you'll notice has an M1937 AT gun. And you might think it looks like there is a bit of a story to that. It is actually based on the PaK-36, but the M1937 is actually a captured Soviet anti-tank gun. And speaking of further captured equipment, that armored car on the distance looks a little familiar, but not quite so. It's actually an M8 Greyhound armored car that, in all likelihood, the German forces may have captured during the Battle of the Bulge or 1945 against American forces. And since now they're short on equipment themselves, they are having to rely on that piece of captured equipment for any substantial fighting against other armored vehicles. Its 37 millimeter cannon isn't any more powerful than the M1937 45 millimeter cannon. Armor mostly at this point in the war than beyond the usual 51 or 70 millimeters on average, they have jokingly become known as door knockers among both German and Allied troops. Unfortunately, the Allies have lost one Sherman tank in the distance, and you see the crew bailing out. The Sherman was a very prolifically manufactured Allied tank with an astounding 49,234 units made over the course of the war. And while in 1942 it was introduced and was a fairly effective medium tank at the time, the war it gradually became more outclassed by the ever-evolving German armor, such as the Panther and Tiger tanks that were more capable of taking it out. That being said, it was such a highly reliable and easily replaceable machine that it made its downsides in terms of armor thickness well worth keeping it in the fight. Allied forces in the Netherlands were, Indian forces specifically, were mostly equipped with M4A4 Shermans, which are a bit, some ways similar to ours, but not entirely. They had an extended rear end for a larger Chrysler multi-bank engine. And while most would have the 75mm main cannon, some of them were upgraded to the Firefly version with the 17-pounder. And one of these tanks on their own even bring a lot of firepower to bear against an infantry section like this. Along with its main cannon, Sherman tanks usually have at least 2 or 3 other machine guns. One coaxial 30 caliber machine gun, one machine gun mod in the front hull, and that big mod used on top, the Browning 50 caliber machine gun. There's a bit of a historical myth that it is actually upon or even illegal to use the 50 caliber machine gun against ground targets. That is actually not true, and it is highly effective in a ground roll, clean through trees, cinder block walls, and even lightly armored vehicles. You see here, to try and hold off the Allied infantry a little bit, the Germans are also relying on 2 MG42 machine guns at the sandbag positions in the forward and backward end of the grassy area of the arena. The MG42 was pretty widely known to be Hitler's buzzsaw, or Hitler's, as Allied troops called it, with an astounding rate of fire of around 1,200 rounds a minute. That is 20 rounds per second. 2.5 seconds all it would take to entirely eat up a 50-round belt if they held the trigger down. And especially when mounted on the highly effective lapet or gun carriage tripod, they could even use it in an indirect fire roll to shoot over the heads of their own troops against advancing enemy forces. Now, to get a better position, most of the German troops are turning back and stepping behind their M1937 anti-tank gun right now to try and get some sort of a fighting chance against the Allied armored vehicles. As I mentioned, though, it's probably not going to do them much good, because that's one of the middle of their more powerful weapons on the field. The best hope they have is actually with the Sturmgeschütz 3 that I mentioned, one at 75mm main cannon. And it's actually basically a 3 medium tank that was in parity with the Sherman, but without a turret like the Panzer III, it was able to be much more prolifically produced with over 10,000 units. And as a tank destroyer, it was a fairly effective vehicle even later in the war. Also notice the Queen Zone Rifles Allied Infantry have brought their Universal Carrier platoon along, which would usually contain 13 Universal Carriers that are usually armed with Bren 303 caliber machine guns, which you can see some of the firing. They also could be armed with the likes of even 50 caliber machine guns, mortars, even flamethrowers. And for such an unseeming and unimposing vehicle, they can actually pose quite a threat. The Allied infantry are conducting is an infantry platoon of around 36 soldiers, usually commanded by a second lieutenant or sections each of 10 soldiers. Each of those sections would actually have a Bren gun team in them. And it's surprising how much of their infantry doctrine was based on the light machine gun on both sides of the war. In the Allied case, every single soldier is wearing pouches on their load-bearing equipment that are filled with Bren gun magazines. So the number 2 person on the weapon who is responsible for resupplying the ammo can always ask a friend for spare Bren gun magazines if they ever run out. You'll also notice that the Allied infantry among themselves are mostly armed with number 4 Mark 1 Enfield rifles, along with their Bren guns. And then some of their NCOs will have Sten guns. The number 4 Mark 1, of course, being a simplified mass production version of the short magazine Lee Enfield that their forefathers had used in the First World War, but largely still firing the same .303 British round and still just as effective otherwise, with a few other updates and changes like a rear aperture sight to make aiming easier and faster. The Sten gun itself is also something of a historical curiosity and a bit of a joke to us now in the sense of how poorly manufactured and basic they can tend to look. They can fire up to 500 rounds a minute, but are not terribly easy to hold and control, and reportedly cost as little as £2 each to manufacture. It was developed in a time when the war situation for the United Kingdom looked especially dire, and submachine guns had to be gotten out to as many units as possible. That being said, it was kept in service throughout the war because it was effective in its intended role. And later versions were improved with better grips and handles to make it easier to use. Interestingly, the MP40 have the same problem. Double-stacked single-feed magazines. When you insert the bullets into the magazine, they end up in 2 stacks while inside the magazine only feed out one at a time, which can cause jamming issues. The Allied infantry are trying to make their way forward and overwhelm reinforcements. And gradually they're making progress. Now we got the armor starting to make its way up as well. And overwhelming them, and they're trying to ultimately move on the M1937 anti-tank gun position. That Stug and the captured MA Greyhound might still pose a threat. Have to wait for their Sherman to deal with those a little more before they can ultimately overwhelm the final position. Stretch. Mind you, I don't think the Germans can actually see them. But if you sneak a peek through the bushes at the very rear of the arena, you can see Allied infantry trying to flank their way around. on the German position now, making a charge for it. They've got bayonets fixed. As you can imagine, staring down the end of one of those bayonets would be enticing enough for most German troops at this point in the war to surrender. Now comes the important but careful task of processing the German soldiers as prisoners of war, which, while that might seem mundane, is anything but. It can actually be pretty dangerous. Sometimes the prisoners could try and pick up a stray weapon that had fallen by and fight back. They could try and run away and escape, in which case they resume being active combatants again. Or they could try and directly attack and fight one of their captors hand to hand. So it's immediately important that the Allied troops consolidate their position and either quickly move along to the next objective, or they would retreat and vacate this position, because as the German lines fell back, it was common.
And that's all for the World War II reenactment. So the second reenactment is from the Gulf War, taken from the afternoon show. This is going to be much more shorter than the first reenactment. So anyways, hope you enjoyed this.
Racing around the flank of the position, while the Iraqi forces are concentrating on that Ferris wheel car they see up on the hill. Even the machine gun team is trying to see the Land Rover coming whipping into their position. Iraqis completely cut off by guard. British light recce are going to make a hasty retreat back to the force. So those Iraqi infantry and those crews are definitely awake now. You heard the Dishka go off. Those light recce vehicles definitely had to peel away. No match for that kind of firepower. But here comes the heavier reconnaissance vehicles. The Scorpions with their 75mm weapons. They take up a position to harass the enemy. They're still afraid of that T-54 main weapon. T-54 is fighting back, being swarmed by the recce vehicles with 75mm cannons just bouncing off of the T-54, but definitely scaring the crew inside. Lots of confusion. How are they going to deal with that T-54? Well, here comes the third line. They brought in Stryker is just spiraling the rockets at the T-54 to take the tank. T-54 is disabled, but still in a nasty defensive position. CDRTs cannot really move up and risk being blown apart by that Soviet-era tank. Rockets raining down on the position and on the T-54. Well, what's this coming from the opposite flank? It's the American forces coordinating with their British allies. They've got the report from the British recce of the Iraqi position. They did a net run around the Iraqi position. There you can see M60 main boundary. Taking down fire. Taking out the T-54. The American reconnaissance element has now covered up the flank. The Iraqis in their position are pinned. British forces coming in on one side, the Americans on the flank and sweeping around the rear. The main battle tank taken out. Still the CRTs need to be caught. M60 still up there on the overwatch position, pinning down all the Iraqi armor, while the British forces looking for their allies on the flank to close in. Slowly slips back. Here come the Americans right in the rear of the position with the M113. You see the TC tank commander, group commander, is getting some fire gun. Deployed armored personnel carriers. They're now pinched from both sides. There's nowhere to run for those Iraqi forces. Now the remaining Iraqi infantry is down by the British and American infantry, reconnaissance forces from the flank. This opportunity to get close, knowing that the Soviet armor is now taken out. And pinched on both ends how quickly these conscript soldiers of Saddam Hussein throw down their weapons and put up their hands. And that's why this war lasted less than 100 days. Let's hear it for our crews, the veterans, and the reenactors. This war was quick. The Iraqi forces were definitely outgunned, outmaneuvered, and but of course Saddam Hussein would still remain in Iraq, and that would lead later on to the Second Gulf War. So
now here's a machine gun demonstration taken from the military vehicle stand. The first demonstration is from a 50 cal machine gun, and it was on a 1942 Surratt Grill Jeep. This machine gun uses propane to fire.
Attention everybody, we're going to be firing the 50 cal machine gun on the Jeep here in about 20 seconds, so cover your ears, it's quite a loud bang. Get your cameras ready if you like.
Oh, the recoilless.
Step in front of the Jeep like I am.
Tank recoilless.
Okay, here we go. This is firing from a 1942 flat grill Jeep, early model Jeep, done up as a SAS, Special Services Jeep. These guys were meant to go in behind the enemy lines, scoot, shoot, and make a big mess for everybody on the other side. So here we go. We're going to fire now. Hold on to your ears.
Fire!
Now the second demonstration is from a 106mm Roquelius rifle, and it's on a 1966 M274-82 mechanical mule.
Ready in 2 seconds here. And that concludes the demonstration for
Now
today.
here's more firing from the 50 cal.
Perfect timing, we're all out of gas.
Unfortunately, we ran out of propane, so we couldn't fire anymore. And here's one more shot of the 106.
Okay, folks, that's it for the day. Thank you.
Well, everyone, I really hope you enjoyed the highlights to the Aquino Tank Weekend in Oshawa. It happens once a year every summer. So if you like to see military stuff, then I highly recommend you come to the show next year. And who knows, I might be there next year too. But that being said though, if you enjoyed this, then you know what to do. Please make sure to give it a really big thumbs up, and subscribe for more videos if you haven't already. That will really help me a lot. And I guess until my next video, I will see you guys later. Peace out folks, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more. Have a wonderful day or evening, depends where you're watching this as well. And that will be it from me. Bye now, and I will see you guys in the next one.